The blood-red sun of Aurora Station cast long shadows across the weathered landing pad as Gale checked his gear one final time. 20 years as a Special Forces operative had taught him to trust nothing but his instincts and the weight of the pulse rifle against his shoulder. His weathered face, marked with a jagged scar running from temple to jaw, remained impassive as he scanned the horizon where the colony's dome met the rusty landscape of this border planet. "All clear, Commander!" The voice in his earpiece belonged to Tobias Reed, a former Marine turned security contractor like himself. "Perimeter secure," Gale responded, his voice a low rumble that matched his imposing frame. "But something feels off." Aurora Station had always been a frontier outpost, the last semblance of civilization before the vast emptiness of the Broken Rim, a lawless region where pirate slavers and mercenaries operated with impunity. The station's position made it valuable, but also vulnerable. That vulnerability had led to Gale's current contract, security detail for the governor's estate during negotiations with the Martian aristocracy. The sky above shimmered unnaturally, drawing Gale's attention upward. A distortion rippled through the atmosphere, the telltale sign of a ship dropping out of hyperspace too close to the planetary shield. "Contact," he barked into his comm. "Unscheduled arrival, Sector 7. The distortion materialized into a vessel Gale had never seen before. Sleek, predatory, with hull plating that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Not Martian, not Earth Alliance, something else. "Breach protocol activated," Tobias responded, but his voice cut off abruptly as a blinding flash erupted from the unknown ship. The electromagnetic pulse hit like a physical blow, knocking out communications and defensive systems across the station. Gale's enhanced neural implants flickered, but held, a military-grade advantage from his Special Forces days. Through the sudden chaos of alarms and emergency protocols, he focused on the descending vessel. It wasn't attacking, it was being attacked. A second ship, massive and bristling with weapon arrays, had appeared. Its design was unmistakable, a slaver vessel from the Broken Rim, notorious for raiding outlying colonies for human and alien merchandise. The first ship, now clearly damaged and trailing plasma fire, executed an emergency landing sequence that would bring it down less than a kilometer from Gale's position. The slaver vessel followed, deploying smaller craft that screamed through the atmosphere in pursuit. Instinct overrode protocol. Without waiting for orders, Gale sprinted toward his skimmer, a decision that would alter the course of his life and, though he couldn't know it then, the fate of entire species across the galaxy. The crash site was a smoking crater, gouged into Aurora's red soil. The smaller vessel had managed a controlled landing, but barely. Its hull was breached in multiple places, and the strange, light-absorbing material now glowed faintly with an inner luminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. Gale approached cautiously, pulse rifle raised. The slavers would be here soon, whatever or whoever was inside. They were in imminent danger. A section of the hull suddenly retracted, revealing an interior bathed in a crystalline blue light. Gale tensed, finger hovering near the trigger of his weapon. What emerged was not what he expected. A small figure, no larger than a human child, stumbled from the opening. Its skin was pale silver, almost translucent, with faint patterns that seemed to shift beneath the surface. Large, almond-shaped eyes dominated a delicate face, their irises a swirling mix of colors that reminded Gale of nebulae he'd seen during deep space jumps. The creature, the child, looked directly at him, and Gale felt something brush against his consciousness, light as a feather, but unmistakably present. "Help," it said, though its mouth didn't move. The words simply appeared in Gale's mind, accompanied by impressions of fear, pain, and desperate hope. Before he could respond, the whine of approaching slaver shuttles filled the air. They would be here in minutes, and Gale knew exactly what would happen if they found this child. Slavers prized exotic specimens, especially those with apparent psychic abilities. "Can you walk?" he asked, lowering his weapon and extending a hand. The child took a hesitant step forward, then collapsed. In one fluid motion, Gale holstered his rifle and scooped the small being into his arms. It weighed almost nothing, its body radiating a subtle warmth despite its silver appearance. "I've got you," he said, turning toward his skimmer. "You're safe now." As if understanding, the child's fear receded slightly in Gale's mind, replaced by a tentative trust that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The first slaver shuttle appeared over the ridge, just as Gale secured the child in his skimmer. He fired a precise burst from his rifle, hitting the shuttle's navigation system. It veered wildly before crashing into the red soil. There would be more coming, but he'd bought them precious minutes. As the skimmer shot toward the outskirts of Aurora Station, away from both the governor's estate and the main settlement, Gale made a decision that defied every regulation in his contract. He would not report this. He would not turn this child over to authorities who might see it as either a diplomatic bargaining chip or a scientific curiosity to be studied and dissected. "What's your name?" he asked, glancing at the small figure huddled beside him. Again, no verbal response, but in his mind, Kira. The impression came with a sense of isolation, of being the last of something precious. "Kira," Gale repeated aloud. "I'm Gale. I'll keep you safe." As they sped toward the abandoned mining outpost where Gale kept an emergency hideout, he tried not to think about what he was sacrificing: his contract, his reputation, possibly his freedom. Instead, he focused on the child beside him and the strange warmth that had begun to spread through his chest, melting something that had been frozen for longer than he cared to remember. Behind them, more slaver shuttles descended on the crash site, and beyond them, undetected by Aurora Station's compromised sensors, another ship entered the atmosphere, its design angular and aggressive, bearing the insignia of the Warrior Council, the most feared military force in the known galaxy. For the first time in 20 years of combat, Gale felt a chill of true dread. If the Warrior Council was involved, this child was far more significant than he had initially believed, and he had just made himself their enemy. The abandoned Balon station loomed ahead, a skeleton of its former self. Once a thriving mining operation, it had been deserted after the ore veins ran dry, leaving behind a labyrinth of tunnels and equipment that made it perfect for someone looking to disappear. Gale had discovered it years ago and had quietly converted a section into a safe house, complete with supplies, weapons, and a small spacecraft capable of breaking atmosphere. He guided the skimmer into a concealed entrance, powering down immediately to minimize their energy signature. The station's thick walls would shield them from most scans, but the Warrior Council was known for its advanced tracking technology. Kira had remained silent during their journey, physically weak, but mentally alert. As Gale carried the child into his makeshift living quarters, he felt a gentle probe touch his mind. Not invasive, but curious. "You're safe here," he assured, setting Kira down on a cot. "But I need to know what's happening. Why are the slavers after you? And why is the Warrior Council involved?" The child's large eyes fixed on him, and suddenly Gale's mind was flooded with images. A crystalline world of breathtaking beauty. Tall, silver-skinned beings with the same shifting patterns as Kira. A cataclysmic attack led by armored warriors. Desperate flight across the stars. And finally, the crash on Aurora. When the vision faded, Gale found himself on his knees, a single tear tracking down his weathered cheek. "You're Cathara," he whispered in disbelief. The Cathara were supposed to be extinct, wiped out nearly a century ago, in what was officially recorded as an evolutionary failure. But whispers among veteran spacers told a different story, of a peaceful, psychically gifted species systematically eliminated because they were perceived as a threat to the established power structures, particularly the Warrior Council. Kira nodded solemnly. Last ship. Last hope. But why come here, to Aurora? In response, Kira's small hand reached out to touch Gale's chest, directly over his heart. Warmth. Connection. You. The implication was staggering. This child, possibly the last of an entire species, had somehow sensed Gale across the vast emptiness of space and had come specifically to find him. The concept should have been absurd, yet he couldn't deny the profound recognition he'd felt upon seeing Kira, as if awakening to something he'd always known but had forgotten. A sudden alert from his security system interrupted the moment. Someone was approaching the station. Gale moved swiftly to the surveillance console. 3 figures in the distinctive armor of the Warrior Council were methodically sweeping the abandoned facilities, their movements precise and coordinated. They carried weapons unlike any Gale had seen, crystalline components integrated with conventional technology, glowing with an inner light similar to Kira's ship. They have Cathera tech, he muttered, a cold realization settling in his gut. That's how they tracked us so quickly. Kira appeared beside him, staring at the screen with visible dread. They hunt my kind for generations, take our gifts, make weapons. How many are there on their ship? A hunting party, 5 warriors, 1 commander. Gale assessed their options with clinical detachment. He couldn't outfight a Warrior Council squad, especially one equipped with technology he didn't understand. Their small spacecraft might outrun them, but not without leaving an easily followed trail. We need to move deeper into the station, he decided. There's an old emergency system that might mask your signature, whatever they're tracking. As they hurried through the dimly lit corridors, Gale noticed Kira's strength was returning. The child moved with increasing grace, the patterns beneath the silvery skin pulsing more vibrantly. They reached a massive chamber that had once housed the station's primary excavation equipment. Ancient machinery loomed like sleeping giants in the darkness. Gale led Kira to a control panel that still functioned on emergency power. This section has lead-lined walls from the radiation shielding they used for the more volatile ore processing, he explained, activating the system. If we... His words were cut short as the nearest entrance exploded inward. 2 Warrior Council soldiers stormed through the breach, their crystalline weapons charged and aimed directly at Kira. Gale reacted with the speed of a veteran combatant, drawing his pulse rifle and firing in one fluid motion. The first warrior fell, but the second's armor absorbed the energy pulse without effect. The warrior raised his weapon, and Gale braced for impact, positioning himself between the attacker and Kira. The blast never came. Instead, the warrior froze in place, then slowly rose into the air, limbs rigid, behind Gale. Kira stood with one arm extended, eyes now blazing with swirling colors. The child's expression remained serene, but Gale could feel waves of protective determination radiating from the small figure. With a gentle gesture, Kira sent the immobilized warrior flying back through the breach, colliding with something, or someone, beyond with a resounding crash. "You're stronger than you look," Gale remarked, impressed despite the dire situation. "Not strong enough. Not yet." Kira's mental voice sounded strained. "Need safe place. Need sanctuary." "Sanctuary? What's that?" Before Kira could answer, a new figure appeared in the shattered doorway, taller than the others, with more elaborate armor and a bearing that radiated authority. Unlike the soldiers, this warrior wore no helmet, revealing a face that was both alien and strikingly beautiful. Gray skin stretched over sharp, angular features, with eyes like molten gold and a crown of bony crests instead of hair. "Commander Gale of Earth Special Forces," the figure spoke, voice melodic despite its hardness. "I am Elra of House Keth, Hunt Commander of the Warrior Council. You have something that belongs to us." Gale raised his weapon again. "The child belongs to no one." Elra's golden eyes narrowed. "That child is the last viable genetic repository of Cathera biotech, the most valuable weapon cache in the galaxy. Surrender it, and the Council will be generous. It's not an it, Gale replied, finger tightening on the trigger. And Kira's not a weapon. The Hunt Commander's expression shifted to something like curiosity. You've bonded with it. Fascinating. The reports of Cathara empathic manipulation were not exaggerated. She took a step forward. The connection isn't real, Commander. It's a survival mechanism. Nothing more. But Gale could feel Kira's presence in his mind. Afraid, but resolute. And undeniably real. The warmth that had been growing in his chest flared protectively. Last warning, he said. Leave us alone. Elra sighed. An unexpectedly human gesture. As you wish. She raised a hand, and the remaining warriors moved into position behind her. Take them both. The human can be studied before disposal. What happened next occurred so quickly that Gale's enhanced reflexes barely registered it. Kira stepped forward, small hands raised, and a pulse of energy erupted outward like a shockwave. The warriors, including Lyra, were thrown backward with tremendous force. The ceiling above them groaned and collapsed, sealing the entrance with tons of debris. Kira swayed, clearly exhausted by the effort. Gale caught the child before it could fall. That won't hold them for long, he said. We need to get to my ship. Yes, Kira agreed weakly. To Kepler Station. Find others who help. Others? Those who remember, those who resist the Council. Gale didn't ask for clarification. There was no time. He lifted Kira into his arms and ran toward the hangar where his small spacecraft waited, acutely aware that they were now fugitives from the most powerful military force in known space. As the ship broke through Aurora's atmosphere, Gale set the coordinates for Kepler Station. It was a risky destination, a major hub of commerce, and consequently heavily monitored, but also their best chance of finding allies and supplies. If there were indeed people who resisted the Warrior Council, they would have representatives there. Kira sat in the co-pilot seat, recovering strength with each passing moment. The child's eyes were fixed on the stars, visible through the viewport, a mixture of longing and sorrow emanating from the small form. Your people, Gale said quietly. They really are all gone? Kira's gaze remained on the stars. Not all. Some sleep in the Great Crystal. Wait for awakening. The Great Crystal? Is that this sanctuary you mentioned? Yes. Hidden beyond the Broken Rim. Safe from the Council. The mention of the Broken Rim made Gale's stomach tighten. That region was treacherous even for the most experienced navigator. A graveyard of ships lost to spatial anomalies, and the hunting grounds of the worst criminal elements in the galaxy. And you believe we can find it? Kira finally turned to look at him. Those swirling eyes, somehow ancient despite the childlike face. Together, your strength, my sight. The conviction in the mental voice was powerful enough to make Gale nod, despite the rational part of his mind screaming about the impossibility of their task. He was now a deserter, harboring what the Warrior Council considered a living weapon, planning to navigate the most dangerous region of space in search of a possibly mythical sanctuary. Yet something deeper than reason compelled him forward, the same inexplicable connection that had drawn him to the crash site, that had made him choose Kira over duty and safety. Together, he agreed, and was rewarded with a sensation of joy that bloomed in his mind, like the first sunrise after a long winter. Their moment of understanding was interrupted by the ship's proximity alert. A vessel was approaching rapidly from behind, sleek, predatory, and unmistakably belonging to the Warrior Council. They found us faster than I expected, Gale muttered, initiating evasive maneuvers. Their tracking technology must be even more advanced than rumors suggest. Kira's face contorted with concentration. Not technology. Me. My essence calls to the crystals they wear, the pieces of my people they use as weapons. This revelation chilled Gale to the core. If the Warrior Council's weapons and tracking systems were literally made from the biological remains of the Cathara, they would never be able to truly hide from them. Then we don't hide, he decided. Adjusting their course, we run, fast and smart. He pushed the ship's engines beyond safe parameters, hurtling them toward the nearest jump point. The pursuing vessel matched their speed effortlessly, closing the distance with alarming rapidity. "Brace yourself," Gale warned, as he executed a maneuver that would have been suicidal for a less experienced pilot, cutting power to all systems, except life support for precisely 3 seconds. Then reigniting the engines at maximum thrust in a perpendicular vector. The ship groaned in protest, but the tactic worked. The sudden disappearance from sensors and subsequent directional change bought them precious seconds, enough to reach the jump point. As they prepared to make the hyperspace jump that would take them to Kepler Station, Kira suddenly stiffened, eyes wide with alarm. "Danger. After jump, waiting." Gale hesitated, hand hovering over the jump initiator. "More Warrior Council?" "No. Others, hunters, for reward." "Bounty hunters." Of course. The Warrior Council would have broadcast a reward for their capture across all frequencies. Kepler Station would be crawling with mercenaries looking to claim the prize. "Change of plans," Gale said, altering their destination coordinates. "We'll jump to the Epsilon City system first. It's mostly uninhabited, just a gas giant with some mining operations on the moons. We can lay low, plan our next move." Kira nodded approval, just as their pursuers came within weapons range. Energy blasts sizzled past the viewport as Gale initiated the jump sequence. The familiar disorientation of hyperspace enveloped them, stretching reality before compressing it back together in a new configuration. When they emerged, the gas giant Epsilon City loomed before them, its swirling storms a canvas of amber and crimson against the blackness of space. Gale guided the ship toward the third moon, a desolate rock with just enough atmosphere for the rudimentary mining facilities established there. As they approached, he activated the vessel's stealth systems, not enough to hide them completely, but sufficient to mask their energy signature from casual scans. They landed in a canyon several kilometers from the nearest mining outpost, the ship's adaptive camouflage blending it with the surrounding rocks. Only then did Gale allow himself to exhale fully. "We should be safe here for a few hours," he said, running diagnostics on their fuel cells and life support. "Long enough to make repairs and plan our route to Kepler." Kira had been quiet during their descent, but now the child moved to stand beside Gale, placing a small, silver hand on his arm. The touch sent a cascade of images through his mind. The Warrior Council vessel they had escaped, splitting into 3 smaller craft, each taking a different direction. One was headed directly for Epsilon City. "They're tracking us through conventional means now," Gale realized. "They've anticipated our strategy." "Elra is clever," Kira acknowledged. "She hunts my kind for many cycles, understands how we think." Gale frowned. "You know this Elra personally?" "Know of her. She is famous among my people. The Crystal Harvester." The grim title needed no explanation. Elra was evidently responsible for obtaining the Cathara biological material used in the Council's weapons. A butcher specialized in Kira's species. "All the more reason to keep moving," Gale said, rising from his seat. "I'll make the necessary repairs. We'll leave as soon as—" He was interrupted by a proximity alarm. Something had entered the moon's atmosphere, following their trajectory with uncanny precision. "Impossible," Gale muttered, checking the sensors. "They couldn't have found us this quickly." Kira's expression was grave. "Not Council. Different hunters." The sensors confirmed Kira's assessment. The approaching vessel was a modified Martian gunship, commonly used by high-end mercenaries, bounty hunters, just as Kira had predicted, and they had somehow anticipated their detour to Epsilon City. "We can't take off with them so close," Gale said, thinking rapidly. "They'd shoot us down before we cleared the atmosphere. We need to deal with them here. He moved to the weapons locker, retrieving his pulse rifle and a compact plasma pistol, which he offered to Kira. The child looked at the weapon with evident distaste. My people do not kill. Neither do I. When I can avoid it, Gale replied. But sometimes survival requires force. You don't have to use it, but keep it with you, just in case. Reluctantly, Kira accepted the pistol, holding it awkwardly. They exited the ship, seeking higher ground that would give them a tactical advantage. The landscape was harsh, jagged rock formations under a thin atmosphere that made the sky appear perpetually twilit. Gravity was lighter than Earth standard, giving each step a floating quality that Gale had learned to compensate for during his military training. They found position atop a ridge overlooking their ship, just as the bounty hunter's vessel descended into the canyon, landing less than 100 meters from their own craft. Its hatches opened to reveal 4 figures in environmental suits, armed with a variety of weapons that gleamed menacingly in the dim light. Jackson Vale, Gale murmured, recognizing the lead figure from his distinctive red armor. One of the best trackers in the sector. This just got a lot more complicated. Vale and his team approached Gale's ship cautiously, weapons ready. They clearly expected resistance. When they found the vessel empty, Vale gestured for his team to spread out and search the surrounding area. They will find us soon, Kira observed. 4 directions, 4 hunters. Gale nodded grimly. Stay close to me. When I move, you move. He waited until the hunters had separated sufficiently, then targeted the one furthest from the others, a tall figure carrying what appeared to be a sonic disruptor. With practiced precision, Gale fired a single shot that struck the hunter's weapon, causing it to explode in a shower of sparks. The hunter went down, stunned but alive. Immediately, the remaining 3 converged on their position, firing indiscriminately at the ridge. Gale pulled Kira down as energy blasts superheated the rocks around them. We need to move, he hissed, guiding the child toward a narrow fissure in the rock face behind them. There's a network of caves that might lead us to the other side of the ridge. As they slipped into the darkness of the cave system, Vale's amplified voice echoed through the canyon. We know you have the alien, Gale. The Council's bounty is generous. But we can negotiate. No one needs to die today. He lies, Kira observed simply. Darkness in his mind, greed, would kill us both. I know, Gale replied, navigating the twisting passages by the light of a small illuminator. Vale's reputation for bringing in targets damaged is well established. They moved deeper into the cave system, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind them. The passages narrowed, then widened into a cavern of breathtaking proportions, illuminated by bioluminescent fungi that clung to the walls. The space was dominated by crystalline formations that rose from floor to ceiling, like the pipes of some colossal organ. Kira stopped abruptly, staring at the crystals with evident wonder. Echoes, resonance, like home. The child approached one of the larger formations, placing a small hand against its surface. Immediately, the crystal began to glow with an inner light, the same swirling colors as Kira's eyes. The glow spread to adjacent crystals, then throughout the cavern, creating a spectacle of light and subtle sound, a harmonious hum that seemed to vibrate through Gale's very bones. What are you doing? He asked, torn between concern about their pursuers and fascination with the display. Connecting, remembering. The crystals live in their way. They remember my kind. The humming grew louder, and Gale felt a strange sensation, as if the cave itself was breathing, pulsing with a life force that was ancient and patient. The sensation wasn't threatening. Rather, it felt welcoming, like returning to a place long forgotten. Kira turned to him, eyes luminous in the crystal light. They will help us. Show us the way. Before Gale could ask for clarification, the far wall of the cavern seemed to shimmer and part, revealing a passage that hadn't been visible before. Through it, he could see daylight, an exit to the surface. "That's convenient," he remarked, unable to keep the wonder from his voice. They moved toward the new passage, but just before reaching it, Gale heard the unmistakable sound of a weapon charging behind them. He spun, placing himself between Kira and the threat. Jackson Vale stood at the entrance to the cavern, alone but heavily armed. His helmet was retracted, revealing a face marred by scars and a cold, calculating expression. "Impressive light show," Vale said, gesturing at the still glowing crystals with his weapon. "The council didn't mention the creature could do that. Makes me think they're not telling us everything about what we're hunting." "Leave us alone, Vale," Gale warned. "This doesn't have to end badly for you." The bounty hunter laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the crystalline chamber. "Always the hero, Gale. That's why you never made it past Commander, despite your talents. Too much conscience." He raised his weapon. "The council wants the alien alive, but they didn't specify condition. As for you, well, the bounty just says confirmed elimination." Vale fired. But something extraordinary happened. The energy blast never reached its target. Instead, it was absorbed by the nearest crystal, which flared brilliantly before redirecting the energy into the ceiling of the cavern. Rocks crashed down, forming a barrier between Vale and his quarry. "Hurry!" Kira urged, already moving toward the exit passage. "Temporary protection only." They emerged onto a plateau, overlooking a vast plain of the moon's barren surface. In the distance, they could see the lights of the mining outpost, and beyond that, the curvature of the horizon against the star-studded blackness of space. "We're exposed here," Gale observed, scanning for threats. "We need to find cover, then circle back to our ship." "No time," Kira replied urgently. "Others come, many others." As if to confirm the child's warning, multiple atmospheric entry flares appeared in the sky above, at least 5 vessels descending rapidly toward their location. "Warrior Council," Gale confirmed, recognizing the configuration. "Vale must have signaled them." Among the approaching ships, one stood out, larger than the others, with a distinctive silhouette that Gale recognized from their encounter at Balin Station. Ularay's command vessel. "The Crystal Harvester comes herself," Kira noted, a tremor of fear coloring the mental voice. Gale assessed their options with the cold clarity that had kept him alive through countless combat situations. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Their ship was likely already under Council control. The mining outpost was too far to reach before the Council vessels landed. "We make our stand here," he decided, surveying the plateau. "Use the rock formations for cover. Try to hold them off long enough to think of something better." Kira looked at him with those ancient, swirling eyes. "There is another way, but risky. Requires trust." "I trust you," Gale said without hesitation, surprising himself with the depth of conviction behind the words. The child extended both hands. "Take. Connect fully. I show you my gifts." Gale holstered his weapon and took Kira's small hands in his. The moment their skin touched, the mental connection between them expanded exponentially. Gale gasped as his consciousness seemed to stretch beyond the confines of his body, extending outward to encompass the plateau, the descending ships, even the vast emptiness of space beyond. Through Kira's perception, he could feel the approaching warriors, their determination, their fear, their absolute conviction in their mission. He could sense Lura most clearly of all, her mind a complex tapestry of duty, ambition, and something unexpected, doubt. "Now understand," Kira's voice echoed within this expanded awareness. "Now defend." Instinctively, Gale understood what was needed. Together, their joined consciousness reached out to the crystalline structures scattered across the plateau, smaller versions of those in the cavern, but connected to the same network. As one, the crystals began to glow, forming a web of light that spread outward from where they stood. The first of the Council ships attempted to land, but an invisible force field repelled it, sending it veering dangerously off course. The others circled cautiously, weapon systems activating. In the center of the plateau, Gale and Kira stood hand in hand, the air around them shimmering with energy that was neither technological nor entirely natural. A synthesis of human will and Cathera psychic ability, amplified by the crystalline network beneath their feet. Illyra's ship hovered directly above them, its weapons trained on their position but not firing. A hatch opened, and the Hunt Commander herself descended on a gravity platform, her golden eyes fixed on the unlikely pair below. "Impressive!" she called out, her melodic voice carrying easily through the thin atmosphere. No Cathara has ever successfully bonded with a human before. The Council will be most interested in studying this phenomenon. "There will be no study," Gale replied, his voice steady despite the strain of maintaining the connection. "No harvesting, no weapons made from sentient beings." Illyra tilted her head, an almost curious gesture. "You speak as if the Cathara were people, Commander. They are resources, powerful, yes, but ultimately tools to be used for the greater stability of the galaxy." "Ask her," Kira prompted. "Ask about the dreams." Following the child's guidance, Gale called out, "Do you dream of crystal songs, Commander Lyra? Do you hear them calling when you sleep?" The question visibly startled the warrior. Her composed expression faltered, golden eyes widening in shock or recognition. "How do you know of this?" she demanded, taking a step forward only to be stopped by the energy field surrounding Gale and Kira. "Show her," Kira directed, and Gale understood what to do. Together, they extended their joined consciousness toward Lyra, not attacking, but inviting. The Hunt Commander stiffened as their mental presence touched hers, her resistance formidable, but ultimately futile against the combined strength of their bond. Images flowed between them. Lyra as a young warrior, being fitted with her first crystal weapon and hearing it sing to her in the darkness. The countless Cathara she had captured and processed, each one diminishing something within herself that she couldn't name. The dreams that had plagued her for decades, dreams of a vast crystalline structure pulsing with life and purpose, calling her home to a place she had never been. "The crystals you wear," Gale said softly. "The weapons you wield. They're not just parts of the Cathera. They're connections to them, to their shared consciousness. Every time you harvest one, you bind yourself more deeply to what you're destroying." Illyra's proud features contorted with conflicting emotions. "Lies," she hissed, but her voice lacked conviction. "Cathara manipulation." "Truth," Gale countered. "And you've always known it. That's why the Council only allows its most disciplined warriors to use the crystal weapons. That's why you're all conditioned from youth to suppress empathy, to view other species as resources rather than equals. Because the moment you truly connect with what you're destroying, the justification falls apart." Around them, the other Council ships had landed, disgorging warriors who now surrounded the glowing energy field, weapons ready, but awaiting orders from their commander. Illyra stood frozen in indecision, centuries of conditioning warring with the undeniable truth now laid bare in her mind. "If what you say is true," she finally said, "then all I have done, all the Council has built, was built on genocide," Gale finished for her. "But it doesn't have to continue. There's another path." "Show her," Kira urged. "Show her sanctuary." Once more, they extended their shared consciousness, but this time with a specific purpose. They showed Lyra the vision of the Great Crystal, the sanctuary, where the last remnants of Cathera civilization slept, waiting for awakening. They showed her a future where humans, warriors, and Cathara collaborated, each contributing their unique strengths to create something greater than any could achieve alone. When the vision faded, Illyra stood silent, her golden eyes reflecting the crystalline light that surrounded Gale and Kira. For a long moment, The plateau was utterly still. The fate of 3 species balanced on the edge of a decision. Then, to the evident shock of her warriors, Elora removed the crystal components from her armor and weapons, placing them gently on the ground before her. The pieces immediately began to glow, resonating with the energy field. "I would see this sanctuary," she announced, her voice ringing with authority despite the unprecedented nature of her actions. "I would know the truth of what we have done, and what we might become." A murmur of confusion ran through the assembled warriors. One stepped forward, his armor marking him as a sub-commander. "Hunt Commander, this is treason against the Council. We are ordered to retrieve the Cathera specimen and eliminate all witnesses." Elora turned to face her subordinate, her bearing every bit as commanding as before. "The Council's orders are based on a lie I have perpetuated for too long. I invoke the right of discovery. Any warrior who wishes may return to the Council and report my actions. Those who would seek truth may follow me." The right of discovery was ancient, rarely invoked but deeply respected in warrior culture. The right of a commander to pursue knowledge that might benefit their people, even if it meant temporarily setting aside standard protocols. The sub-commander hesitated, then stepped back, lowering his weapon. Others followed suit, though some remained visibly uncertain. Elora turned back to Gale and Kira. "You have shown me a possibility I never considered. Now show me the path to this sanctuary." The energy field surrounding them dimmed slightly, allowing Lora to step closer. Kira extended a small, silver hand, which the warrior took after only a moment's hesitation. The connection was immediate and visible, a pulse of light that traveled from Kira to Lora, causing the patterns beneath the Cathera child's skin to momentarily align with the bone crests on the warrior's head. "She sees," Kira confirmed to Gale. "She knows the way now." "Not all the Council will accept this change," Gale warned, acutely aware of the warriors still watching them. "There will be pursuit once they realize what's happening." "Let them come," Elora replied, a new conviction in her voice. "I know their tactics, their resources. I can hold them off long enough for us to reach the sanctuary." "Us?" Gale raised an eyebrow. "You have bound yourself to the last known living Cathera," Elora said, gesturing to their still joined hands. "And I have committed what my people consider the highest treason. Our fates are now intertwined. Commander Gale, whether we wish it or not." There was something almost like humor in her golden eyes, an emotion Gale would never have expected from the feared Hunt Commander of the Warrior Council. It made her seem suddenly more relatable, more human, despite her alien appearance. "Then we'd better get moving," he said, scanning the sky. "Vale and his bounty hunters are still out there, and it won't take long for word of this to reach Council headquarters." "To Kepler Station first," Kira suggested. "Find ship for Broken Rim. Need special vessel for crossing." Elora nodded in agreement. "My command ship has the necessary shielding and navigation systems, but it's designed for a full crew. We'll need allies." "I know someone on Kepler," Gale said, thinking of an old comrade who had retired there after the Proxima campaign. "Someone who knows how to keep secrets and has no love for the Council." The decision made, they moved quickly. Elora ordered her loyal warriors to secure their vessels and prepare for immediate departure. Gale and Kira boarded Elora's command ship, a vessel of such advanced design that even Gale's extensive military experience hadn't prepared him for its capabilities. As they broke atmosphere, heading for the jump point that would take them to Kepler Station, Gale found himself in the unprecedented position of standing on the bridge of a Warrior Council vessel, not as a prisoner, but as an ally. Beside him, Kira gazed out at the stars with renewed hope, while Ulra issued commands with the confidence of one who had finally aligned actions with deepest truth. "The Council will brand me Oathbreaker for this," she remarked quietly to Gale when the jump sequence was initiated. "The highest shame our people recognize." You've chosen a harder path, he acknowledged, but a truer one. Elra's golden eyes met his. Truth was never a warrior virtue. Perhaps it should have been. The ship entered hyperspace, carrying them toward an uncertain future. 3 individuals from 3 different species, bound together by a connection none of them fully understood, but all had chosen to honor. Behind them, the Council's dominance remained unchallenged. Ahead lay the possibility of something new, a balance that had never before existed in the known galaxy. As the hyperspace corridor enveloped them in its otherworldly light, Gale felt Kira's consciousness brush against his, not merging this time, but sharing a simple emotion, hope, bright and fierce as a newborn star. Kepler Station loomed before them as they emerged from hyperspace, a massive construct of interlocking rings surrounding a central hub, all rotating in perfect synchronization to create artificial gravity. Thousands of vessels of varying sizes docked at its numerous ports, a testament to its status as one of the busiest commercial hubs in the sector. "We can't dock a Warrior Council vessel openly," Gale observed, studying the station's traffic patterns on the command console. "Not with me and Kira aboard." LRA nodded in agreement. "The outer maintenance ring has automated docking bays. We can override one and enter the station through the service corridors." The plan worked with suspicious ease. LRA's command codes granted them access to a maintenance bay designed for much smaller vessels, but large enough to accommodate a shuttle from their ship. They left most of Elra's warriors aboard the main vessel, taking only 2 trusted lieutenants as escort. As they moved through the station's less trafficked areas, Gale couldn't help but notice how seamlessly they had begun to function as a unit. Laura led with the confidence of one accustomed to command, her warriors flanking them protectively. Kira stayed close to Gale, silver skin partially concealed by a hooded cloak, but those remarkable eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Your contact?" Elra asked quietly, as they approached the more populated sections of the station. "Can they be trusted with knowledge of the sanctuary?" "Dr. Eleanor Zhang," Gale replied. "Former military scientist who left service when she discovered her research was being weaponized without her consent. She understands the cost of military exploitation better than most." They reached a junction where the service corridor opened onto a busy concourse. Crowds of humans and aliens moved through the space, focused on their own concerns. Merchants, travelers, station workers, all part of the constant flow of commerce that kept Kepler thriving. "We'll need to cross the main concourse to reach Eleanor's lab," Gale explained. "Stay close and keep your faces covered. The station has automated security systems that might flag known individuals." They merged with the crowd, moving purposefully, but not so quickly as to draw attention. Kira stayed between Gale and Laura, one small hand clutching each of their arms. The child's presence in their minds was muted, but vigilant, a constant awareness scanning for threats. They were halfway across the concourse when Kira suddenly stiffened. "Danger. Coming. Many minds hunting." Gale followed the child's gaze and spotted them immediately. A squad of station security officers moving systematically through the crowd, accompanied by 2 figures in the distinctive uniforms of military police. Not Council warriors, but Earth Alliance enforcers, which meant someone had reported his desertion. "Change of plans," he murmured, guiding their group toward a side passage. "We need to split up. Security is looking for us." Elra assessed the situation with a tactical eye. "My warriors and I will create a diversion. You and the child proceed to your contact. We will rejoin you when possible." Before Gale could argue, Elra and her 2 lieutenants had melted into the crowd, moving with purpose toward the opposite end of the concourse. Within moments, a commotion erupted. Something about unauthorized weapons and diplomatic immunity, loud enough to draw the attention of the security team. "That's our cue," Gale said, guiding Kira swiftly toward their original destination. They reached a quieter section of the station, an area designated for research laboratories and specialized medical facilities. Eleanor's lab was located at the end of a corridor, its entrance marked only by a simple nameplate. Dr. E. Zhang, Xenobiological Studies. Gale pressed his palm to the security scanner beside the door, hoping that Eleanor hadn't removed his biometric access from her systems. After a tense moment, the door slid open with a soft hiss. The laboratory beyond was a testament to Eleanor's methodical mind. Equipment and specimens organized with military precision, every surface immaculate. The woman herself stood with her back to them, examining something through a holographic microscope. Her salt and pepper hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Breaking and entering, Gale?" she remarked without turning around. "That's new, even for you." "Hello, Eleanor," he replied, unable to suppress a smile despite their dire circumstances. "Sorry for the unexpected visit." She finally turned, her sharp features softening slightly at the sight of her old colleague. Then her gaze fell on Kira, and her eyes widened in professional fascination. "Is that... But they're supposed to be extinct," she breathed, approaching slowly. Kira stepped forward, lowering the hood to reveal that silver skin and those remarkable eyes. Not extinct, sleeping, waiting. Eleanor jumped slightly at the mental communication, then composed herself with the discipline of a scientist accustomed to unexpected phenomena. "Telepathic, too. Fascinating." She looked back at Gale. "I assume this is why there's a station-wide alert for your arrest." "That and desertion. Harboring a fugitive, and probably treason, depending on who you ask," Gale admitted. "The Warrior Council wants Kira. I couldn't let that happen." "The Council," Eleanor repeated, her expression hardening. "Those butchers. They're the reason the Cathara were supposedly extinct in the first place." She knelt to Kira's level. "You're safe here, little one. My lab is shielded from standard scans." "Thank you," Kira responded, the mental voice carrying genuine warmth. "Your heart is good." Eleanor stood, fixing Gale with a penetrating look. "Now, tell me everything, and don't leave out any details. Especially why my security system just informed me that a Warrior Council hunt commander is attempting to access my lab." Gale explained the situation concisely. Their encounter on Aurora Station, the revelation of the sanctuary, and Olara's unexpected alliance with their cause. Throughout his account, Eleanor's expression shifted from skepticism to wonder, and finally to resolute determination. "So you need a ship capable of navigating the Broken Rim, and a crew willing to defy both Earth Alliance and the Warrior Council," she summarized when he had finished. "You don't ask for small favors, do you?" "We have LRA's command ship," Gale pointed out. "But we need someone who understands Cathara biology, in case we encounter difficulties at the sanctuary. And someone I trust." Eleanor was silent for a long moment, her gaze shifting between Gale and Kira. Finally, she sighed. "I've spent 20 years studying the fragments of Cathara biology I could get my hands on. The chance to see a living sanctuary, to potentially witness the revival of an entire species. How could I refuse?" The laboratory door slid open again, revealing Lara. The hunt commander entered cautiously, her golden eyes taking in the laboratory and its occupant with careful assessment. "Dr. Zhang," she greeted formally, "your reputation extends even to council archives." Eleanor's expression cooled noticeably. "Hunt Commander, I've examined the results of your harvesting techniques. Impressive efficiency, horrifying ethics." Rather than taking offense, LRA inclined her head in acknowledgement. "A fair assessment. One I would not have accepted days ago." She turned to Gale. "The diversion was successful, but temporary. Station security is expanding its search parameters. We must leave immediately." "My private shuttle is docked in the research bay," Eleanor offered, already moving to a console to initiate preparation protocols. It's designed for extended xenobiological fieldwork, smaller than your command ship, but less conspicuous and equipped with advanced stealth systems. "What about your warriors?" Gale asked Lyra. "They will return to the command ship and rendezvous with us at the coordinates Kira provides," she replied. "They are loyal to me, not to the Council's lies." As Eleanor gathered essential equipment and research materials, Gale felt a gentle tug on his mind. Kira, requesting attention. He knelt beside the child, who placed a small silver hand against his cheek. Connection growing stronger. Kira observed, eyes swirling with emotion. Soon, full awakening. For me, for others in Crystal. "Is that good?" Gale asked, uncertain of the implications. "Necessary but dangerous. Power attracts power seekers." Before Gale could ask for clarification, station alarms began to blare. A computerized voice announced a security lockdown in progress. All docking bays sealed. All departures suspended until further notice. "Someone's serious about finding us," Eleanor remarked grimly, shouldering a pack filled with equipment. "Let's move. The research bay has override protocols for emergencies." They moved swiftly through the back corridors of the research sector, avoiding the main concourses where security would be heaviest. Twice, they had to duck into empty laboratories to avoid patrols. During one such moment, pressed into the shadows of a storage room, Elara suddenly stiffened. "Council presence," she whispered, her golden eyes narrowing. "Not my warriors. Others. They've sent another hunting party." Gale felt a chill run through him. "How many?" "At least a full squad, and—" Lyra's expression darkened. "A harvester." The term needed no explanation. Another like Lara, a specialist in capturing and processing Cathera for their biological materials. Someone who would recognize Kira immediately and understand the child's true value. Their path to the research bay became a tense game of evasion, using Elara's knowledge of council tactics and Kira's psychic awareness to avoid both station security and the newly arrived hunters. Eleanor led them through service tunnels and maintenance shafts, using her researcher's clearance to bypass locked sections. Finally, they reached the research bay, a specialized docking area reserved for scientific vessels. Eleanor's shuttle was modest in size but sleek in design, clearly built for both durability and speed. "Boarding protocols initiated," she announced, pressing her palm to the entry scanner. "We should be able to launch before they realize—" Her words were cut short as the bay doors slid open. A figure stood silhouetted against the corridor lights, tall and imposing in the distinctive armor of a council hunt commander. But not Lara. Where Lara's armor bore the blue insignia of House Keth, this commander's markings were blood red. "House Varn," Lara murmured, her voice tight with recognition. "Trev of House Varn. The council sent their best." The rival commander stepped forward. Golden eyes, similar to Lara's, but colder, more calculating. "Lara of House Keth," he greeted, his melodic voice carrying an undercurrent of malice. "The council was disappointed to receive reports of your activities. They sent me to correct your error in judgment." Behind him, a squad of warriors filed into the bay, weapons ready, but not yet aimed. They were giving Elara a chance to explain herself, to return to the fold, a courtesy extended to one of their highest-ranking commanders. Elara stepped forward, placing herself between the new hunting party and her unlikely allies. "There is no error, Trev. Only truth too long denied." She gestured toward Kira. "The Cathara are not resources to be harvested. They are beings with consciousness and rights. The Council's policy has been built on genocide." Trev's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted subtly, the preparation for combat. "You've been compromised by Cathara influence. It's a known risk of prolonged exposure to their biological material. The Council will cleanse your mind once we return." My mind is clearer than it has ever been, Ulra replied, her hand moving to the ceremonial blade at her side, the only weapon she still carried after discarding her crystal-enhanced armaments. Stand aside. Trev. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. The rival commander's cold eyes flicked to Gale, then Eleanor, and finally settled on Kira. The human deserter and the researcher are inconsequential. Surrender the Cathera specimen, and the Council may show leniency. Not going to happen, Gale stated, stepping forward to stand beside Lara, his pulse rifle raised and ready. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Kira stepped forward, those remarkable eyes fixed on Trev with an expression that somehow combined compassion with defiance. You dream too. The child's mental voice reached all present, causing the warriors to shift uncomfortably. Crystal songs in darkness, calling you home. Trev's composed expression faltered momentarily. Silence your mind, creature, he hissed. Your manipulations have no effect on me. But Kira continued, silver hands raised in a gesture that was both supplication and invitation. Listen deeper, beyond training, beyond fear. Truth waits. For a heartbeat, it seemed the child's words might have an effect. Trev's rigid posture softened almost imperceptibly, his golden eyes widening with something like recognition. Then, the moment passed. His features hardened once more, and he raised his crystal-enhanced weapon. Take them, he ordered his warriors. The Cathara alive. The others are expendable. What happened next occurred with such speed that later, Gale would struggle to reconstruct the sequence of events. Kira's form suddenly blazed with light, the patterns beneath that silver skin pulsing like captured lightning. A shockwave of energy erupted outward, not violent but overwhelming, a psychic pulse that staggered everyone in the bay. In that moment of disorientation, Eleanor slapped the emergency launch sequence on her shuttle. Doors began closing, engines humming to life. Elra moved with preternatural speed, engaging Trev directly to prevent him from targeting the others. Their combat was a blur of precision and power, two elite warriors perfectly matched. Gale scooped Kira into his arms, the child now limp with exhaustion from the psychic effort, and rushed toward the shuttle. Eleanor close behind. They made it inside just as the first energy blasts from the recovering warriors struck the closing doors. Elra! Gale shouted, seeing the hunt commander still locked in combat with her rival. She glanced toward them, golden eyes fierce with determination. Go! I will find you at the sanctuary! The shuttle doors sealed, cutting off their view of the battle. Eleanor took the controls, her hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the emergency situation. The vessel detached from its moorings and shot toward the bay exit, which was already beginning to close as station security responded to the disturbance. We're not going to make it, Eleanor muttered, pushing the engines beyond safe parameters. Beside her, Gale felt Kira stir in his arms. The child's eyes opened, still swirling but dimmer now with fatigue. One small silver hand reached out toward the closing bay doors. Together, Kira's mental voice whispered, Your strength, my sight. Understanding immediately. Gale placed his hand over Kira's, focusing his will as they had done on the plateau of Epsilon Ceti. The connection blossomed between them, and he felt the child drawing on his physical vitality to supplement depleted psychic resources. Ahead, the massive bay doors shuddered, their automated closing sequence momentarily disrupted. The gap was narrow, too narrow for a standard approach, but Eleanor didn't hesitate. She rotated the shuttle sideways and gunned the engines, shooting through the gap with mere centimeters to spare on either side. They burst into open space, alarms blaring as station defense systems targeted them. But Eleanor's shuttle lived up to its specialized design, its stealth systems engaging to confuse the targeting arrays, just long enough for them to reach jump distance. Coordinates for the broken rim, she asked, hands flying over the navigation console. Kira, still cradled in Gale's arms, projected the necessary information directly into both their minds, not numbers and calculations, but an impression of stellar configurations and spatial relationships that somehow translated seamlessly into navigational data. "Remarkable," Eleanor breathed as the coordinates appeared on her console. Input by her own hands, though she couldn't recall typing them. "That's well beyond the charted boundary of the rim." "Can we make it?" Gale asked, concerned by the extreme distance. Eleanor's expression was determined as she initiated the jump sequence. "We're about to find out." The familiar disorientation of hyperspace enveloped them. But something was different this time. The passage seemed smoother, as if they were being guided by an unseen hand. Through his connection with Kira, Gale sensed the child was somehow facilitating their journey, using abilities that went far beyond mere telepathy. "What about Laura?" he asked quietly, once they were safely in hyperspace. "Will she be able to follow?" "She follows already," Kira replied, those swirling eyes closing with exhaustion. "Different path, same destination. Crystal calls to all who hear." As the child drifted into a recuperative sleep, Gale exchanged a concerned look with Eleanor. "How long until we reach these coordinates?" She checked the navigation system, her expression grave. "At maximum sustainable speed, approximately 72 hours. And that's assuming we don't encounter any of the spatial anomalies the rim is famous for." Gale nodded, settling into a seat with Kira still cradled protectively in his arms. "Then we have 3 days to prepare for whatever awaits us at this sanctuary. Let's hope it's everything Kira believes it to be." Eleanor's expression softened as she looked at the sleeping child. "A chance to restore a species thought extinct. To right a historical wrong of this magnitude. It has to be worth the risk." As the shuttle hurtled through hyperspace toward the uncharted depths of the broken rim, Gale found himself hoping she was right. They had sacrificed too much already for this to be anything less than the salvation Kira had promised. The journey through the broken rim lived up to the region's notorious reputation. Twice, they were forced to drop out of hyperspace to navigate around spatial distortions that would have torn their shuttle apart. Once they encountered a pirate vessel, avoiding detection only thanks to Eleanor's advanced stealth systems and Kira's growing ability to mask their presence psychically. Throughout the journey, the child's strength continued to return, and with it, abilities that seemed to expand by the hour. Kira could now communicate with both Gale and Eleanor simultaneously, sharing complex concepts and memories with an efficiency that verbal language could never achieve. The patterns beneath that silver skin glowed more vibrantly, and occasionally objects in the shuttle would move without being touched when Kira was focused on them. The proximity to the sanctuary is accelerating the child's development, Eleanor observed on their 3rd day of travel, running a handheld scanner over Kira's form while the child sat patiently. "These readings suggest neural activity far beyond what I would have thought possible for any biological organism." "Not just me," Kira explained. "All connected. The great crystal amplifies, preserves. Those who sleep inside await awakening." "How many survived?" Gale asked, the question that had been bothering him since learning of the sanctuary's existence. Kira's expression grew solemn. 47. All that could be saved when hunting began. Not enough for natural continuation of species, but enough for new beginning, with help." "Help?" Eleanor's scientific curiosity was piqued. "What kind of help?" Before Kira could answer, the shuttle's proximity alert sounded. They had reached the coordinates, or rather, the outermost boundary of the area Kira had directed them to. What lay before them defied easy description. The view screen showed a region of space, unlike any Gale had encountered in his extensive travels. A vast nebula of crystalline particles that caught and refracted light in hypnotic patterns, creating a shimmer that seemed almost alive. At its center, barely visible through the glittering cloud, was a structure, enormous and geometrically perfect, its surface faceted like a gemstone of impossible size. "The Great Crystal," Eleanor whispered in awe. "It must be at least 20 kilometers in diameter." "Home." Kira's mental voice was thick with emotion. "Last home of my kind." Gale studied the sensor readings with growing concern. "How do we approach? The particle density would tear our hull apart at anything above minimal speed." In answer, Kira moved to stand before the view screen. Small, silver hands pressed against the transparent surface. The patterns beneath the child's skin pulsed in a complex rhythm, synchronizing with the shimmering particles outside. "I call," Crystal answers. Before their eyes, the glittering cloud began to part, forming a clear pathway directly to the massive structure at its center. It was like watching a living thing respond to a familiar touch, the particles moving with purpose and intelligence rather than according to physical laws. "Incredible," Eleanor breathed, her scientific detachment momentarily forgotten in pure wonder. The entire cloud must be some form of programmable matter, responding to Cathera psychic signatures. Gale was less concerned with the science and more with practical considerations. "Any sign of pursuit, or Elara's ship?" Eleanor checked the long-range sensors. "Nothing on conventional scans, but this region plays havoc with standard detection systems. We could have a fleet behind us and not know it until they were on top of us." "No pursuers close," Kira assured them. "But coming, always coming, must hurry to awakening." With the pathway open before them, Eleanor guided the shuttle forward at a cautious pace. As they drew closer to the massive crystalline structure, details became visible that had been obscured by distance, intricate patterns etched into its surface, pulsing with the same inner light that animated Kira's skin, and what appeared to be docking bays or entrances at regular intervals. "There," Kira directed, pointing to one such opening. "Ancient One's entrance. Still functions." Eleanor maneuvered the shuttle toward the indicated port, which widened as they approached, another response to Kira's presence. They passed through the opening into a vast chamber that could have housed a vessel 100 times their size. Its walls, faceted like the interior of a geode, glowing with soft blue light. As the shuttle settled onto the crystalline floor, Kira was already moving toward the exit hatch, practically vibrating with anticipation. Gale and Eleanor followed, both overwhelmed by the scale and alien beauty of their surroundings. The atmosphere within the structure was breathable, slightly more oxygen-rich than Earth standard, with a subtle fragrance like ozone after a thunderstorm. Gravity was present, but lighter, giving each step a floating quality. And everywhere, that same pulsing light emanated from the crystalline surfaces, creating an environment that felt somehow both technological and organic. Kira led them through corridors that shifted and widened as they passed, the structure itself responding to their presence, or more specifically, to Kira's. They eventually emerged into a central chamber of breathtaking proportions, a dome of perfect acoustics, where the slightest sound carried with crystalline clarity. At the chamber's center stood a formation that immediately drew their attention, a crystal, larger than all the others. Its surface a deep, midnight blue that seemed to contain countless tiny stars. Within it, Gale could just make out shadowy forms suspended in its depths. "The sleeping Cathara," he guessed, approaching the formation with reverence. Kira nodded, placing a small hand against the surface of the great crystal. "My people, last of Cathara, in stasis until safe awakening possible." Eleanor circled the formation, scanner in hand, her scientific curiosity fully engaged. "The technology is beyond anything I've encountered. These readings suggest they're in a state between traditional stasis and some form of shared consciousness. Their minds are active, but collectively rather than individually." "Yes," Kira confirmed. "Together in Crystal Dream, waiting." "Waiting for what?" Gale asked, sensing there was more to this than they yet understood. The answer came from behind them, a melodic voice that echoed perfectly in the crystalline chamber, waiting for the three conditions to be met. They turned to find Lyra standing at the entrance to the chamber, her armor scuffed and damaged from battle, but her bearing as proud as ever. Behind her were three of her warriors, similarly battle-worn but alert and ready. "You made it," Gale observed, relief evident in his voice. Elra inclined her head. "At considerable cost. Trev and his hunting party were persistent." She approached the great crystal, her golden eyes reflecting its inner light. "But it seems we arrived in time." "In time for what?" Eleanor asked, looking between Elra and Kira. It was the child who answered, both aloud and in their minds. The first time Gale had heard Kira's actual voice, a sound like wind through crystal chimes. "In time for awakening. Three conditions now met: protector, knower, connector, all present." The designations were clearly meaningful, though Gale couldn't immediately decipher them. Lyra, however, seemed to understand, her expression shifting to one of solemn recognition. "The ancient prophecy," she murmured, "from the Council's most restricted archives. When the last becomes first, when the hunter becomes guide, when the seeker becomes finder, then shall the sleeping ones wake." "You're speaking of us," Eleanor realized, glancing between the three of them. "Gale the protector, myself the knower or seeker, and you the former hunter." Elra nodded. "It would appear so." The Council suppressed these prophecies, dismissing them as Cathara manipulation tactics, but they feared them enough to record and study them in secret. Kira moved to the center of the chamber, directly before the great crystal. The child's form was now luminous, the patterns beneath the silver skin flowing like liquid light. "Time has come. New beginning. Join hands. Join minds." Understanding instinctively what was required, Gale, Eleanor, and Lyra stepped forward, forming a circle around Kira. They joined hands, creating a physical circuit that Kira completed by touching each of them in turn. The connection that formed was unlike anything Gale had experienced, deeper than his previous mental links with Kira, more comprehensive. He could feel Eleanor's brilliant, analytical mind and Lyra's disciplined, warrior consciousness as clearly as his own thoughts. And beyond them, like a vast ocean of light, the collected consciousness of the sleeping Cathara. Through their joined awareness, Kira guided them in a process that words could not have explained, each contributing an essential element. Gale provided the protective will, the fierce determination to preserve life. Eleanor contributed understanding, the bridges between different forms of consciousness. Elra offered transformation, the proof that even the most entrenched perspectives could evolve toward truth. The great crystal began to pulse more rapidly, its deep blue surface gradually lightening to a luminescent azure. Within its depths, the shadowy forms became more distinct, Cathara adults, their forms similar to Kira's, but larger, more developed, their patterns more complex. Then, with a sound like a massive bell struck deep underwater, the crystal began to open, not shattering, but unfolding, like a flower in bloom. As the facets parted, the suspended Cathara drifted gently outward, still in their stasis-like state, but now accessible. Kira moved forward, touching the nearest figure, taller than the child, with more elaborate patterns that suggested greater age and development. At the touch, the adult Cathara's eyes opened, the same swirling nebulae as Kira's, but somehow deeper, more ancient. One by one, Kira awakened the sleepers, each emerging from their crystal cocoon with growing awareness. There were 47 in all, just as Kira had said, a pitiful remnant of a once thriving civilization, but enough to begin anew. The first awakened, the one Kira had touched initially, approached their small group. Unlike Kira, this adult spoke aloud, though the mental component was still present, creating a dual-layered communication both rich and precise. "I am Tella, Elder of the Cathera," she introduced herself. Her actual voice, similar to Kira's but deeper, more resonant. "We have slept long, waiting for this convergence. The child has done well in finding you." "It was Kira who found us," Gale clarified, still adjusting to the dual communication. "We only helped." Tella's swirling eyes regarded him with something like gentle amusement. "The finding was mutual. Protector. As it always must be for true connection." She turned to Eleanor. "Know her. Your species has evolved much since we observed it last. Your curiosity serves the greater harmony." Finally, to Laura. "Connector. Your journey from destruction to creation is perhaps the most significant of all. Your people have much to learn from your example." Elra bowed her head in a gesture of unexpected humility. "My people have done great harm to yours. This cannot be undone, only acknowledged and redirected." "Precisely," Tella agreed. "The past is crystallized, unchangeable but transparent, allowing light to pass through to illuminate the present. It is the present moment that concerns us now." As the other Cathera fully awakened, they gathered in the chamber, creating a loose circle around the humans and warriors. There was no hostility in their manner, only intense curiosity and what felt like cautious hope. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked, her scientific mind already contemplating the implications of this revival. 47 individuals is a critically small population for genetic diversity. Tella nodded, acknowledging the concern. "We cannot restore our species through conventional reproduction alone. But the Great Crystal has preserved more than just our physical forms. It contains the complete genetic and memory records of our civilization at its height." She gestured to the walls of the chamber, where the crystalline surfaces now displayed shifting patterns of light that resembled complex DNA structures. "With time and the right conditions, we can cultivate new generations from these templates. And those conditions include cooperation with other species," Gale surmised, beginning to understand the greater purpose behind their gathering. "Yes, Protector," Tella confirmed. "Isolation led to our near extinction. The future requires integration, cooperation, symbiosis. Humans with their adaptability, warriors with their strength and order, Cathera with our psychic harmony. Together we form something greater than our separate parts." Eleanor's scientific mind was already racing with possibilities. "A cultural and potentially biological synthesis. Extraordinary." Before they could explore these implications further, an alarm sounded, not mechanical, but a crystalline tone that resonated through the chamber. The Cathara stiffened, their patterns pulsing in synchronized alarm. "We have visitors," Tella announced grimly. "Uninvited ones." Elray's warriors immediately moved to defensive positions, while Elra herself addressed the Elder. "The Council has found us. They would have followed my ship's trajectory." Gale accessed the shuttle's remote sensors through his neural implant. "Multiple vessels approaching, Council design, heavily armed." He turned to Laura. "Trev?" She nodded. "Almost certainly. He would not abandon the hunt, especially after I bested him in combat. This is now a matter of honor, as well as duty for him." "How much time do we have?" Eleanor asked, her hand unconsciously moving to the scientific equipment at her belt, as if its instruments might offer some solution. "Minutes only," Tella replied, her melodic voice calm despite the dire situation. "They have penetrated the outer particle field and are approaching the docking bays." Kira moved to the center of the group, those remarkable eyes blazing with determination. "Fight, not answer. Connection is." "The child is right," Tella agreed. "Violence against violence only perpetuates the cycle that nearly destroyed us. There is another way." She turned to Lara. "Connector, your understanding of both worlds makes you essential now. Will you stand with us in the final awakening?" Elray's golden eyes narrowed in momentary confusion, then widened in realization. "The crystal resonance. It's not just a legend. It is our most sacred technology, Tella confirmed. And our most dangerous. It requires perfect harmony between diverse consciousnesses, something we believed impossible until now. Until the three conditions were met. Outside, the sounds of approaching vessels grew louder. Time was running out. "What do you need from us?" Gale asked. The soldier in him, ready for whatever action was required. Tella gestured for them to reform their circle around the great crystal, which still pulsed with inner light. What we began with the awakening, we must now complete. A full synchronization of consciousnesses, amplified by the great crystal and projected outward. If successful, it will create a psychic bridge that even the most hardened warrior cannot resist. Truth, unfiltered by prejudice or training. "You mean to force your way into their minds?" Eleanor asked, concerned. "Not force," Tella corrected gently. "Invite, with a clarity that cannot be denied. Free will remains, but with perfect understanding of what is being chosen." They had no time for further discussion. The first echoes of footsteps could be heard approaching the central chamber. Council warriors, dozens of them, led by the distinctive tread of a hunt commander. "Now," Tella urged, taking her place in the circle. "Open your minds fully to one another, without reservation. The crystal will do the rest." Gale hesitated only momentarily before complying. After all they had experienced, after the journey that had brought them here, trust was no longer a conscious choice, but an established reality. He opened his mind, feeling Eleanor's scientific brilliance and ethical certainty flow into his awareness, followed by Lura's disciplined strength and newfound purpose. Beyond them, the Cathara consciousness expanded like an ocean of light, Kira's familiar presence serving as their anchor point. The great crystal responded to their synchronized consciousness, its light intensifying until it filled the chamber with a radiance that was almost tangible. In that light, Gale could perceive the structure of reality itself, the connections between all forms of life, the resonances that bound the universe together in ways science had only begun to glimpse. Trev and his warriors burst into the chamber at that moment, weapons raised, crystal components glowing with deadly energy. But they froze at the threshold, overwhelmed by the spectacle before them. "Surrender the Cathara!" Trev demanded, but his voice lacked conviction, his golden eyes fixed on the luminous crystal and the unified beings surrounding it. Tella spoke, her voice somehow containing all their voices, a harmony of human, warrior, and Cathara tones. "There is no surrender. Hunt Commander, only awakening. Join us or leave us, but understand what you choose." The crystal resonance reached its peak, sending a wave of pure consciousness outward from their circle. It engulfed Trev first, then his warriors, not attacking, but revealing. Every Cathara that had been harvested for their weapons, every life cut short, every connection severed, all of it laid bare, not as accusation but as simple truth. And with that truth came its counterpart, the possibility of harmony, of cooperation that enhanced rather than diminished, of strength found in diversity rather than conformity. The future that could be, if chosen freely. Trev fell to his knees, his proud bearing crumbling under the weight of revealed truth. One by one, his warriors followed, some removing their crystal-enhanced weapons and laying them reverently on the floor. "What have we done?" Trev whispered, his voice stripped of command and filled instead with genuine horror. Elora stepped forward, breaking the circle but maintaining her connection to it. She approached her fellow hunt commander, extending a hand not in challenge but in invitation. "What was done cannot be undone," she said, echoing Tella's earlier wisdom. "But what will be done remains our choice. The Council has been wrong. Trev, we have all been wrong. The Cathara are not tools or weapons. They are the bridge we never knew we needed." For a long moment, Trev remained frozen in indecision, generations of training and indoctrination warring with the undeniable truth he had just experienced. Then, with a gesture that would change the course of galactic history, he reached up and took Lara's offered hand. The symbolism was lost on no one present. The two highest-ranking hunt commanders of the Warrior Council, united in a new understanding that transcended their military hierarchy. Where their decision led, many would follow. "The Council will not accept this easily," Trev warned, as Lara helped him to his feet. "They have built too much of their power on Cathera technology." "Then we build something new," Gale suggested, stepping forward to join them. "A different kind of council, where all three species have equal voice and equal protection." Eleanor added her perspective. "An alliance based on knowledge and cooperation rather than dominance. The scientific possibilities alone are staggering." Tella and the other Cathera moved to complete the circle, no longer divided by species, but united in purpose. Kira stood at the center, the catalyst who had brought them all together, those remarkable eyes reflecting the light of possibilities yet to be realized. "It begins here," Tella announced, her voice carrying the weight of both ancient wisdom and newborn hope. "The Great Crystal has preserved us for this moment, not merely to survive, but to transform. The sanctuary is not just for Cathara, but for all who seek harmony across the divisions of form and origin." In the days that followed, the sanctuary became exactly that, a place of refuge and renewal, as news of the awakening spread through both official and unofficial channels. More Warrior Council members arrived, some hostile at first but invariably transformed by their encounter with the unified consciousness centered around the Great Crystal. Human scientists and diplomats followed, drawn by Eleanor's carefully distributed reports of a discovery that could revolutionize interspecies relations. Among them were those who had long suspected the truth about the Cathera extinction and had worked in secret to preserve what fragments of their culture and biology remained. The transformation was not without resistance. Portions of the Warrior Council denounced Elara and Trev as traitors, sending additional hunting parties that found themselves either converted to the cause or rendered harmless by the crystal resonance. Earth Alliance officials initially declared the sanctuary a restricted zone, only to find their authority meaningless in the face of a movement that transcended traditional political boundaries. Through it all, the unlikely trio at the center held firm. Gale with his protective determination, Eleanor with her bridge-building knowledge, and Elra with her transformative journey from hunter to ally. Together with Tella and the reawakened Cathera, they began crafting the framework for a new kind of interstellar cooperation. Kira, once the last and youngest of a nearly extinct species, blossomed under the guidance of the Cathara elders. The child's abilities grew exponentially, but always tempered by the wisdom of connection rather than isolation. Through Kira, the human-Cathera bond grew especially strong, a psychic harmony that complemented humanity's adaptability and creative drive. 6 months after the awakening, a formal treaty was signed aboard a vessel hovering at the edge of the crystalline nebula. Representatives from Earth Alliance, the reformed Warrior Council, now calling themselves simply the Guardians, and the Cathera Collective. The treaty recognized the sovereignty of the sanctuary while establishing protocols for cooperation and exchange between the three civilizations. On the observation deck of that vessel, Gale stood with Eleanor and Laura, watching the sanctuary shimmer against the backdrop of stars. Kira joined them, no longer the frightened child rescued from a crashed ship, but a confident young being with a foot in multiple worlds. "Did you ever imagine it would come to this?" Eleanor asked. "When you first found Kira on Aurora Station?" Gale shook his head, a smile softening his weathered features. "I was just trying to save a child from slavers. Reshaping galactic politics wasn't exactly on my agenda. Yet, here we stand," Lura observed, her golden eyes reflecting the crystal light. "The crystal harvester, the human deserter, and the curious scientist, architects of a new order. Not architects, Kira corrected, still preferring mental communication for its nuance despite having mastered spoken language. Catalysts. The pattern was always there, waiting to be recognized. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. Connection instead of conquest. Harmony instead of hierarchy. It seems so obvious now, yet it took us almost losing an entire species to see it. Some truths can only be learned through great cost, Elora said softly. The challenge now is to ensure the lesson is not forgotten. As if in response to her words, a new vessel appeared at the edge of the nebula, massive and ornate, bearing the insignia of the Martian aristocracy. The treaty signing had attracted attention from powers throughout the galaxy, many curious about the force that had managed to transform the fearsome warrior council. Our work is just beginning, Gale observed, watching the Martian vessel approach. There are countless other species, other civilizations that could benefit from what we've learned here. Then we continue, Kira stated simply. Together, your strength, my sight, their wisdom. The young Cathara gestured to include all of them in the statement. The true sanctuary is not a place, but a connection. As they prepared to receive the Martian delegation, Gale reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a desperate rescue on a frontier planet to the cusp of a galactic renaissance. The warmth that had begun in his chest when he first held Kira had expanded, becoming something greater than himself, yet still fundamentally part of him. He had been a soldier, trained to protect through force and strategy. Now he was something else, something that had no name yet in human language, but that the Cathara called Tervash, one who bridges worlds through protective love. The future stretched before them, luminous with possibilities. Not without challenges or conflicts, those were inevitable where free will existed, but with a new foundation of understanding that made resolving those conflicts possible without destruction. As the Martian vessel docked and diplomacy continued its careful dance, the four of them, human, warrior, scientist, and Cathara, stood together at the threshold of that future, ready to step forward into the unknown, connected in ways that transcended biology and origin, united in the most powerful force in the universe, the choice to see beyond difference to the harmonies that bind all life together. The crystalline nebula pulsed behind them, a testament to what could be preserved through darkness and rediscovered in light. Not just a species or a technology, but a truth as old as consciousness itself, waiting patiently to be remembered once more.